Welcome to my thesis presentation. My name is Charles Butler III. I'm a Cooperstown graduate student currently. Class of 2019, CGP as it is known, is where Professor Gretchen Soren is the director as well as teaches, and Professor Will Walker, who's also a professor there and also teaches. He, along with Gretchen and Professor Peter Ruckoff from Kenyon College, helped me bring this to you today. Good morning again. Thank you for coming. What you're going to see here is about 2 years worth of research done on this topic, country rap tunes. But what is country rap tunes? Country rap tunes is a seminal genre, like a musical genre, with its roots in Port Arthur, Texas. It blends sampling techniques and instrumentation with the aesthetic of gangster rap from the West Coast coming out of the 90s with the vibrancy of New Orleans funk to create this distinct and influential style. Country rap tunes is something that many people define many different ways in the South. But the creator himself, Chad Lamont Butler, in 2007, with an interview with Rhapsody The Basement, a BET program, said this to the interviewer.
To say that the lyrical content in the South is not as deep as some other parts of the country would not be a lie. To say that all of the music is not good would be a lie. And to put everybody in the same category would be a grave mistake.
Okay.
See, I don't know about what they doing, but what I'm doing down there is called country rap tunes. It's a derivative of what was done in New York and what came from hip hop and what was done on the West Coast with the gangster music. When I'm making country rap down there, you know what I'm saying? It's a little bit slower.
Okay.
It's got some church influence into it, so it's got a gospel feel. It's got a soul feel to the music. We play a lot of the instruments, you know, and I can't speak for them other dude with me and.
So why does it matter? Why does it matter that country rap tunes is even a thing, honestly? So, for those answers, we can ask the people themselves, and I have. So through this research, I've gathered from Atlanta rappers like Killer Mike, who gave an interview in a 2012 documentary that explained how they invented this genre within a genre, and that's what we'll listen to right now.
They became global because they were the South, not because they were exempt from it somehow. You know, they're a global sensation because they were underground, not because they chased commercialism. So for me, when you talk about UGK, you talk about the creme de la creme of Southern country rap tunes. You know, they invented a genre within a genre.
Julia Beverly, CEO of the Ozone magazine, which started as a pamphlet in Orlando, Florida, back in the early 90s, this woman launched her own platform to bring a voice to Southern artists that did not previously have a voice in the mainstream culture. In an interview that I did with Julia just last year, who then wrote the book on Pimp C's autobiography, his entire life story pretty much. In an oral history interview with her, she said, by creating country rap tunes, he wanted to call it something else so that it could be his, and then he could have some ownership over it, because he didn't feel as if he was being accepted by the rap community. He's making the same music, talking about some of the same symptoms of urbanization that affect low-income communities, setting it to a style familiar with many at the time, yet still did not get the type of recognition that many artists got in the 90s. So Port Arthur, let's talk a little bit about Port Arthur and where this is. So Port Arthur is a small town in southeast Texas, and it's adjacent to the Sabine Neches waterway, demarcated by this river waterway here. Arthur Stilwell, who was a resident at the time of Rochester, New York, his envision for Port Arthur was of Port Arthur as a place for tourism and transportation. These visions included an active port. By 1901, the Spindletop Geyser in Beaumont, Texas, brings the refinery industry and economics prosperity to Port Arthur. Now, if you want to look at the figures there, the line that we see, the horizontal line in the next slide that we'll see is Houston Avenue. In 1912, this is a map produced by the Port Arthur Board of Trade. It is advertising Port Arthur as the most direct steamboat route to the Panama Canal in 1912. There are other maps that demarcate Cuba, Liverpool, for example. They are advertising access to the global market. They're offering this access through the Kansas City Southern Railway to Midwesterners who grow agricultural product at the time. So grains, flour, anything that you can put in a barrel, put on a train, and ship south, that is who Arthur Stilwell envisioned coming to Port Arthur. So that line, Houston Avenue, that red line that we hear so much about throughout history that segregates black and brown communities, black and white communities rather, here in Port Arthur it was no different, no different. At this time you have people like Nelson Eggerly, who's a Port Arthur resident, who, while he delivers papers on that side of town, has almost no recollection of what that town's name is, what happens there, other than they lived over there across the tracks somewhere. Here we see the Kansas City Southern Rail playing another part in the memory of the people in Port Arthur themselves. This interview was taken back in 2016. Nelson Eggerly is a citizen of Port Arthur throughout the 50s and the 60s. He delivers papers over there, but only knows nothing past Houston Avenue. Mitchell Queen Jr., who's the founder of UGK, the Underground Kings. He did an oral history interview with me in 2019, recorded here in Cooperstown, New York. We'll let him tell you about Port Arthur and his experience dealing with segregation.
Port Arthur, segregated east side, west side. It was only white folks on the east side, and all the black folks was on the west side. It was segregated for a long time. I don't think the segregation stopped until like the 50s or something like that. And it was definitely just like any other southern town, in the South back then. They were segregated, but being segregated, a lot of black pride came out of being on that west side, and we took care of ourselves because we didn't have a choice. The store owners on that side of the tracks, they were black, and we looked up to those cats because we were trying to get stores and get businesses also, but it was very, very, very hard to get any kind of money to start up any kind of business back then because no banks would give, black folks money.
What you're seeing here, Mitchell Queen on the left, and an oil appreciation dinner in 1952. Before we advance, I want to just tell you a little about that image and why that image is on the opposite side of Mitchell Queen. Here at this dinner, you'll see a sea of white faces. These are mostly white men. This is Southeast Texas. Lucas Oil Geyser has been gushing since 1901. So you're having the town, the Port Arthur Chamber of Commerce, which is where this photo takes place, is done at an oil appreciation banquet, or a dinner rather, to begin to show good faith to those oil executives that are steadily increasing their real estate in Port Arthur on the west side community. Now, on that west side, you'll hear in a minute Nelson Eggerly, Port Arthur resident, talk about, in his own words, in an interview with the Texas Christian University Black and Brown Civil Rights Archive, in his own words, his experience with segregation in Port Arthur.
And this is a seaport town, so they had houses of ill repute. And I've never been in them, but they was down there right off of, or on Houston Avenue, the whites, and then the blacks was across the railroad track somewhere over there. That was the black houses of ill repute.
And so they were.
So Nelson, he mentioned something, and this thing is coming up more often. This rail, they're on the other side of the rail. The Kansas City Southern Rail that was laid by Arthur Stilwell by conjoining a bunch of short Texas rails is how this word is known in the shipping industry in the early 19th century. The next slide we'll see is the vernacular, a word that you will find in the country rap tunes vernacular, short Texas, short Texas. What's there? Why am I talking about a rail right now? Why are these things connected? Well, in 1899, you see short Texas specials up there. Please excuse the small print. This is there for demonstrative purposes. These short Texas specials are essentially advertising a move Arthur Stilwell executes at this time in 1899 to join short Texas rails. What are short Texas rails? Any rail with about 25 miles at length or shorter is known as a short insert state rail. So there's a short New York, there's a short Pennsylvania, there's a short Illinois, there's a short Louisiana. And here we see short Texas being mentioned by way of this deal in 1899. By 1929, we see in the Port Arthur News prohibition. They're raiding places on Texas Avenue. Now this Texas Avenue that I'm referring to isn't the rail line owned by Arthur Stilwell and the Kansas City Southern Rail LLC. This here, what I'm talking about, 1929, is the Port Arthur News effectively distributing a narrative or crafting a narrative of this place. This place, where is it? Behind Short Texas, that rail. On the 600 to 400 block of Short Texas Avenue, known there as Texas Avenue, bisected by West 7th Street, at this time is the location for all nefarious activities, drugs, prostitution, gambling during Prohibition. Basically anything that is illegal at that time, you have an active port, you have refineries coming in, you have industry, and the symptoms of urbanization are beginning to reveal themselves as demonstrated here in 1929 and 1965. So by 1990, when the crack epidemic happens, it's well known, well documented through the Port Arthur News, the Houston Daily Post, and the Beaumont Enterprise that this place, the 600 to 400 block of Texas Avenue on the west side of Port Arthur, a historically segregated community where Nelson Eggerly and others like him are under the mindset that these are nothing more than people who live and operate black houses of ill repute. This is the narrative throughout the decades, so that by 2007, when a hustler from Short Texas is approached for an interview in a documentary in 2007, he mentions, to his recollection, it all started around 1972. The old players wouldn't let nobody young come up here. When it was our time and the crack epidemic spread, it exploded. That's 2007. So by 1990, as the crack epidemic happens, we begin to see people like O.G. Block, who were residents of the local high schools, bringing this culture, bringing this prison culture from the Texas Department of Corrections directly from the prisons on Highway 365 to the 600 to 400 block of Short Texas Avenue. So this is where we begin to see the prison culture mesh with the underground culture that is Short Texas. Now the word shrill, this word pops up a lot. It pops up a lot when you're listening to anything UGK, anything 3-6 Mafia, anything Tommy Wright III, so on and so forth. Any artist in the South that is making music at this time, in the 90s, in the 80s, are hearing this word, because just as there's a Short Texas and there's Short Louisiana, there's also an underground scene there as well. But the word shrill which effectively means to be true and real. This is how they characterize their aesthetic of being honest with one another, of dealing with one another on a level playing field, a level playing field that was not provided to them by the powers that be during their time. So in 1990, the Port Arthur News begins to print indictments above the fold, whereas in the 1920s and 1930s, you see advertised between the Beaumont and Port Arthur News, this back and forth that happens. Port Arthur says, look at our world port, we're celebrating 25 years. Check out what Beaumont, Texas said about us in a blurb right underneath it, effectively staking their claim. We're the world port, we have everything going. You don't have an interstate yet, but we have all the resources and all the economy. So, Chad Lamont Butler, who is this guy? Who is he exactly? In 1967, Charleston Butler, who marries Wesleyan Jacobs, affectionately known as Mama West, they meet in Crowley, Louisiana. These are two Creole people. Now, Charleston Butler, one thing you all do not know, he played backup with Otis Redding. The day of the unfortunate accident, Charleston let his friend travel on Otis's plane the night it crashed. Now, he meets Wesleyan Jacobs in 1967. Chad is then born December 29th, 1973 at St. Mary Hospital in Port Arthur, Texas. So by 10 years old, in 1983, Chad, a young Chad, is hearing hip hop for the very first time. He's hearing Run DMC for the very first time. And it was at that moment, Chad said, I want to be a rapper. But you can't just combine rap without having some of these other influences that I alluded to earlier. What we should know about Chad is that Monroe, his stepfather, after Charleston and Mama West's divorce, Mama West meets Norwood, affectionately known as Bill Monroe, at a local high school in Port Arthur called Stephen F. Austin High. There, Wesley and Butler worked as a librarian. She held a master's degree in English. Norwood Bill Monroe received this promotion. In this photo, you're seeing him receiving a promotion and assuming his mantle as assistant principal in a town, in a part of Port Arthur that is historically white. This is a significant achievement in this community, of which there are many by this time. But as Nelson Eggerly alluded to earlier, the only thing that he really knew about this town is that they had black houses of ill repute. Where? On the other side of the train tracks, Houston Avenue, there again, being that dividing line. These are the people who live across that dividing line. Norwood Bill Monroe, was a trumpet player as well as a band director and assistant principal. This man is juggling so many hats. And by 8 years old, 2 years before Chad hears Run DMC for the first time, he's receiving musical training and notation, instrumentation from this band director, this trained musician who had an eye for his mother, essentially. So where did Chad go, and where does he receive further training to develop this musical aptitude that we're going to detail a bit later in this presentation? So Lincoln High School, built in 1920 for African American students at a cost of $167,000 in that time's currency. It became the center for black students. Here we have an oral history sample where Mitchell Queen is going to tell you a bit about what his time was like in 1991 there at Lincoln High School.
It was not about them. It was not about their salary and what they were being paid. It was about getting that kid to a better place than they were. That's what that was all about. It was about leaving there, preparing yourself to go to college and to be a better person. Not just a better black person, but just a better person overall. You know, you're just in your skin. You know, that blackness and that color that you know, you shouldn't see all that anyway. You know, but it's the skin, being comfortable in your skin around your own people, and knowing that your own people are just as smart as any other race of people out here.
Those words are from Mitchell Queen, UGK founder Mitchell Queen. So it's here at Lincoln High School. Again, this is the 90s. The crack epidemic has occurred and has reached its zenith before the federal government comes in to shut it down. And it was here that Butler began to consume and put and incorporate into his productions 70 soul from his favorite group, the Isley Brothers. So by 1991, Chad is hearing this and trying to figure out, how do I incorporate this into my sound? So by the summer of 1988, a lot begins to happen in Port Arthur with regards to its attempt at making hip hop. This is at a time where in which rap is in its, hip hop rather, it's in its infancy and is about to mature into what is known as rap's golden era. By 1988, that same waterway, the Sabine Nature's waterway that takes ships to the Panama Canal, to Liverpool, to Cuba. By 1988, these ports, a majority of these ports are still shipping to and from, for the exception of Cuba, the Port Arthur port. That waterway is directly on the other side of where Mitchell Queen, Boomtown, and Pimp C are seated. So it's during that summer that Butler and Mitchell Queen formed their own hip hop group. The name the duo settled on, created by Mitchell Queen, was the Underground Kings. Intrigued by the young duo, DJ DMD, pictured center in the middle, became the unofficial third member of a newly formed group, the DMI Posse, Dangerous Music Incorporated. Again, they are forming hip-hop bands. They have break dancers on both sides, and they have a DJ, and they have a myriad of talented MCs just waiting to get into that New York industry. Bun B. Who is Bun B? The half of UGK that most people know today. Bernard Bun B Freeman, pictured left is his wife, Queenie. Bun B was born in Houston, Texas, March 19, 1973. By fall of '89, Bun B starts attending the Summit program at Lincoln High School. Here is where you begin to see Pimp C interacting not only with the music at the church, but with other rappers not pictured in the hip hop group that he's already aware of in '88. So just a year after that, Bun B comes and then he meets Pimp C at a summer program at Lincoln High School. Now, Mitchell Queen Jr. and Bun B graduate from high school in 1991. Mitchell Queen Jr., who was a football player at the time, takes his talent to Prairie View A&M University, a historically black college and university in Prairie View, Texas. There, at that point, Bun B becomes the second half of UGK, the UGK we all know today. So at the time, when they're trying to like push this group's sound into the mainstream, or at least just get some recognition, you have the Ghetto Boys in Houston, Texas, signed to Rap-A-Lot Records, whose CEO is James Prince, pushing Houston's form of rap. This is up here because it does come in the timeline rather before Pimp C. He's not producing this music, those are other producers. But this is to demonstrate the moves are happening in Southeast Texas to become a viable market in the South. Now, what's their connection to Port Arthur? Mama West, who worked at the school, who was well known in the community, would organize fundraisers for the Carnegie Trip. This Carnegie Trip was one in which Lincoln High School senior band director or choir director Marjorie Cole accepts an invitation for her choir to go and sing at Carnegie Hall in New York City. Now this is at the same time where rap is becoming much more of a well-known event. This is in 1991 this happens. And a 19-year-old DJ Action, Scarface, who's pictured on the far right of the Ghetto Boys, they were in town. Now, they were in town not to go specifically to this event, but instead, Julia Beverly writes in her autobiography, or her biography of Pimp C rather, that they were there on another mission. They were there to go to Short, Texas to make some money, likely to pay for studio time. So what was their reaction when they began to release music? At this point, they're signed to Big Time Records, which is an independent record store run by CEO Russell Washington at a flea market in Houston. They signed to this label and then eventually signed with Jive Records. But that's not before they enter Tell Me Something Good, their first single off their EP, The Southern Way, onto a radio station. It was subsequently disqualified and the song removed after no other song could top it on that chart. Once they found out they were signed by an actual label, the studio cut the single. But by then, too many people had heard UGK's style of music. They have heard Pimp C's country rap tunes, but they have no idea what to call it. Now, when you want to hear the reaction of some hip-hop greats as it relates to what Pimp C brought to the industry of hip-hop at this time, we can hear here in an interview that he gave speaking on Pimp C's influence and his legacy in an interview taken in 2008.
He was a straight shooter. You know, the way he talked, he just give it to you. You know, so it was like that in the music, you know. It was cold-hearted. It was cold spit. You know, it was from his soul to the world, and you couldn't get around that. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't get away from that. They were just pioneers.
So by 1993, they released The Southern Way, and Use Me Up is one of those singles taken that has a heavy dose of 70s soul music. Bill Withers is the sample that he takes and incorporates it into Use Me Up. He's beginning to develop in 1993 a sound that many will come to know as country rap tunes. But what are the elements of country rap tunes? Well, these are the ones that I've been able to identify in the 2-year span. More research will be needed in the future. However, for the purposes of this presentation, they are as follows. Dickies, signifying blaxploitation, gospel, New Orleans funk, West Coast gangster rap, and hip hop sampling techniques. Now, as it relates to Dickies, in an interview that Big Gift gave to, or did with rather, Hot 1079 Atlanta, Big Gift does this interview where he mentions seeing Mama West, that sweet lovely lady you saw before, arriving at the dungeon in Atlanta where Smokey and Outkast and the Dungeon family are making beats for Atlanta rappers that would later go on to make diamond selling records. He said, Mama West wore Dickies, Bun had on Dickies, Pimp C had on Dickies. And from that first moment of meeting them, they went from strangers to family almost instantaneously because of that style.
Dickies.
So what is signifying? Henry Louis Gates defines it here. However, if you would ask some of these same oral history interviewees, what is signifying? He talks about signifying, people like Mitchell Queen would talk about signifying as a way of capping, as a way of playing the dozens, or doing toasts, or even rapping. So by this time, he's making this music. This is what he's listening to. This is what he's incorporating. But what does he put this music to? Well, in terms of signifying toasts, as I alluded to earlier, these are events in which comedians and entertainers like Red Fox, Rudy Ray Moore, and LaWanda Page would entertain the masses with a live band to rhymes that turn phrases on their head. Here we're going to listen to a sample that is taken from a LaWanda Page record, The Hoes in Church, from the album Mother is Half a Word in 1971. He incorporates the sound you just heard with this sample on Tell Me Something Good.
Yeah, baby, act like you feel it, because you'll never feel it, but just pretend you do, you know. Honey, get in the bed, honey, you got to do like this, do like I tell you. You got to do it like this. Huh? Daddy, mother.
Blaxploitation being another element in the music. When asked, Mitchell Queen, why is pimp culture so important to country rap tunes? He said these words simply: let's make them see what we're trying to do. The image on the left is a cream fur coat worn by Max Julien as the character Goldie in the 1973 film The Mac. What you're seeing on the right side of this, juxtaposed to Goldie's fur coat, is an image from 2007. Pimp C has taken this aesthetic and he has incorporated into his sound, his sampling, as well as his look. This is taken from a music shoot in 2007 where Outkast and 3 6 Mafia, two country rap tunes, groups identified by my oral history interviews as being a part of this country rap tunes family. Here's a scene from the International Players Anthem where he's just getting ready. Pimp C is ready to introduce his image of what is country rap tunes to the world with 2007's International Players Anthem, and he uses Willie Hutch's sample from I Choose You off the same movie soundtrack. So by the time he then begins to incorporate this, he also says, I need some gumbo funk. I need something that'll get people moving. I need something that's from the roots. New Orleans funk with its roots in the Treme neighborhood where Congo Square is. Congo Square, which was previously a slave market in a historically segregated part of New Orleans is where this music, this New Orleans funk is born. Pimp C, who has roots in Crowley, Louisiana, knows this. And he then gets this, he then begins to incorporate funk. We're going to listen to an oral history snippet by Avery Harris, who was trained by Pimp C to make country rap tunes, talk about the importance of having a funk background as a musician.
Funk more than blues. So, yeah. Funk definitely, you gotta have a funk background. Funk background is not you being a funk player, but you understand funk. Because if you don't, you will never be the producer diamonds up against the wood. Impossible.
So he's talking about how important it is to know what funk is, have it being a part of the fabric of your being as a musician. Now, without that, there's no way that Chad begins to incorporate things like the rigor mortis sample played by the meters to country rap tunes. As if that would be it, Chad said he needed a little bit more because it wasn't just right yet. With roots in gospel music, it makes perfect sense that Chad's first instrument that's given to him is a key organ, a Hammond organ. The one thing that it does to country rap tunes that sets it apart from West Coast gangster rap, from East Coast hip hop at this time, is its incorporation of this ceremonial instrument played live in the studio. Church becomes important. The spiritual nature of the music is then applied and assumed from the gospel influence. Here we see 3 obituaries from past residents of Southeast Texas that have passed away. The one thing, none of these people know each other. One thing each one of these obituaries has in common is that there's an organ that's there, playing throughout the entirety of the celebration. And I say celebration on purpose because in the South, in Louisiana, where when death happens, a second line then follows that casket along with the family who's mourning, who may or may not be drunk. And then those who enjoy music behind them celebrating the life of the person who has just passed away. This is the reason why we have the organ not only in the ceremonial services, observing life, a full life at that, but he also then begins to incorporate it into the music itself. And there's nowhere that this happens except inside the black churches like the First 6th Street Baptist Church that we saw earlier. So here, DJ Bird, in the book he wrote, this is the official DJ for UGK, Daniel Grogan, a Port Arthur resident, who says the one instrument that we knew could move down south black folks was the Hammond organ. We loved the organ, so we went to work incorporating the church sound of the organ in Southern hip hop, just like we thought people felt it and they were moved. By the time Menace to Society comes out, a film directed with a black director, 500,000 copies of this single, Pocket Full of Stones, released on Jive Records, is then featured on, or in rather, this movie. Killer Mike mentions this Pocket Full of Stones is off of Too Hard to Swallow, their first album on Jive, a major independent label. It was a moment for Killer Mike. And it's that reaction that Pimp C was after when he incorporated that into his music. Now, when you talk about hip-hop sampling techniques, Big Boy mentions he remembers hearing that Tell Me Something Good, that Use Me Up with the Bill Withers sample, and the hand claps as the snare. Pimp C replaces that, and that is also taken from the gospel roots of country rap tunes, the gospel roots of Butler himself. So when we're going to hear about Pimp C talking about busting the plastic off of vinyl of Run DMC in a 2007 interview about the album that he's making at the time.
You don't even have to buy records to hear the single no more. You just turn on the video show and watch the video. And you heard it already and you keep moving. You know, back then, I didn't hear the Run DMC album until I bought it that day. And it was something special about busting that package open. On an album, I mean, man, you can't even buy an album no more. They CDs, man. I'm talking about, it was something about dropping that needle on that album, busting that plastic, and dropping the needle on that album. It was...
So, by 1996, the seminal album, the seminal country rap tunes album, as identified by my oral history interviewees, by Dungeon family members, by Goody Mob members, Big Gift, Ride Dirty is the quintessential country rap tunes sound. And just to demonstrate the connection between Houston rap, as characterized by Rap-A-Lot acts, the Ghetto Boys, the connection between them and Port Arthur comes in this moment in which Jive pays for a photo shoot. This photo shoot happens outside of DJ Screw's home in Houston. DJ Screw, Robert Earl Davis Jr., one of the most iconic DJs in Houston, who established a form called Chop and Screw, is then associated here with UGK in this staged carjacking. That's what you're seeing up here. And we're going to hear DJ Bird talk about their process of making Riding Dirty in '96.
Shit. So motherfuckers calling for shows, all kind of promoters. We had shows every weekend. So we kept rolling. We had shows every week, 2 weeks, sometimes 2 shows. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We have 2 shows back to back, and we get that money. Like 40,000 a motherfucking show, man. Now damn, this shit went up to like 40,000 a show, man. That shit was incredible, man. I mean, she had to get 40, man. 45. I said, take care of Pimpin' Bud. Bud wasn't them 120 each.
So, in the second oral history interview, we're going to hear Mitchell Queen, who's around at this time, featured on 3 in the Morning, a single off of the Riding Dirty album, talk about what the feeling was like at this point to be on top, meaning to be that well known in both the underground community and among their peers. That is there on top. Not the platinum records on BET, not the Grammys. There on top was, I've made it because my peers know I've made it.
Because nobody in the mainstream does what we do. You know what I'm saying? We became the mainstream and people got mad because they didn't want to do what we were doing. You know, they didn't look at us like, that's, oh man, that ain't hip hop, you know what I'm saying? Because, our country drawl and, all this. But when they started coming down here and kicking it and seeing how the women was accepting them East Coast cats too, a lot of them cats started easing back off of that shit.
So when you talk about the reaction that they're receiving, they're talking about their peers. They're saying they're coming to the South to hear our music. Here we see Pimp C talking about the ascendancy of Southern rappers, some of which I've mentioned earlier in the presentation.
You know, we just having fun with this thing, man. And I'm just trying to bring some more unity into this rap thing and squash all the BS, you know what I'm talking about, all the beef. If it ain't about no money, man, it really ain't about nothing. So what we trying to do is all come together and unionize at some stage in this game and stop these record company people from taking advantage of us, man. Because that's really what's going on. They laugh at us when we go to war with each other. It ain't about no paper. And as long as we going to war, they gonna run the South and run the industry. So we got to get up off the BS.
Julia Beverly on the New York reaction to country rap tunes in an oral history interview in 2018.
Originally when he started, he really wanted to be accepted by the hip-hop community, which was, you know, primarily New York. And over the years, as he kind of felt that rejection from them, that they weren't, you know, he supported all their music. He went to all the early, you know, rap tours. He bought all the early rap albums. But when he was trying to put out his material, he didn't really get that same love from the East Coast, from New York specifically. And so at a certain point, it was like, okay, well, I don't need your cosign anymore. I'll create my own thing. So, you know, that was just something, by creating country rap tunes, you know, he wanted to call it something else so that it could be his and that he could have some ownership over it, I think, because he didn't feel like he was, you know, being accepted by the rap community.
Here we hear an earlier point reiterated by Julia Beverly about why he created country rap tunes. Here we hear Mitchell Queen in 2019 talk about how country rap tunes took rappers, people who you would otherwise see on Short Texas Avenue hustling, took those people off of the streets, equipped them with his country rap tunes productions, and allowed them, through his promotion, through his productions, to make a living for their family outside of the legal activity.
That's what made him so crucial to our sound, the country rap tune sound, because he was putting people on that would normally be on. He was taking cats off the streets and making them superstars. I mean, he was absolutely essential to half of Houston MC's career.
So with this aesthetic, with NYC's reaction to country rap tunes, Pimp C then begins to make singles like Knocking Doors Down, a single that was released in Houston, Texas, that incorporate pretty much any and every Houston rapper that was at odds and with one another at the time. And it was through country rap tunes that he was able to conjoin everyone's influence on a single called Knocking Doors Down. Now, going forward into what the conversation is regarding country rap tunes, coming into 2019, going into 2020, much of the research that I've presented to you here today does contend with who has the rights to the word country, who has the rights to identify as to what country is. Here I've been talking about country rap tunes. No time, at no point did you see Hootie and the Blowfish. Did you see Conway Twitty? Here is a different country. This is a country that has been shaped and molded in the church. The people who have contributed to this culture met in high school, hustled on a nearby hustle cut on the 600 to 400 block of Short Texas to pay for studio time to make the music that we're listening to today. And many of their influences are born of their community on the other side of Houston Avenue. Thank you.
Bye.